no lie. Everybody knows I'm cold, and I dug up all your flaws. Cause the men in my past, they did me wrong, but you respected me. And I pushed you away till you had no choice but rejecting me. And you showed me your heart, and I showed you the door, so you left me. And the women who ask where the good men go, they go away. As far as you push them, as far as you push them, away, away, away. As far as you drive them, as far as you drove them, away, away, away. As far as you hide them till you overlook them, away, 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 No, it's getting old, but I just need to say that I'm sorry for all that I've done. Now it's untold. Looking back on the days, I think maybe that I was in love. Here you take your gold. Some poison, this venom, this toxic, oh baby, I'm cold.
Let's drop the subject down another 2 degrees. And let's slow the heartbeat and the breathing down.
Downloading the brain and then planting that in another host brain.
They're selling this technology to the highest bidder, and I will not be moved. I vote no.
These are some of the most powerful people in the world. She's about to spoil their attempt at life everlasting.
The richest of the rich have their fountain of youth.
This could give them a new body and a new life.
If you don't change your position, I can't protect you.
We're breaking so many laws right now, Oliver.
Get it done. Understood? There's $5 million in it for you and your boys.
My parents are back here to my house. Please don't do this.
What happened here? Family's missing.
The whole family is missing.
I'm gonna help. I need to know what you know.
I will let them go as soon as we complete the merger. In her absence, the board has the authority to cast her vote.
The purpose of this technology was never so that we could play God.
This thing is way bigger than either you or I.
Don't worry about the odds too much.
How are you doing?
I'm great. How about you?
I'm doing good. That looks so suspenseful. You do the most suspenseful movies. Tell us about that.
Thank you. I think it's from how I grew up. All those 90s thrillers are so ingrained in me that I just love the building of suspense. And then as a youngster, being very heavily influenced by Hitchcock, where he built suspense the whole way through, I think that's only natural for me at this point.
Okay, so you're from Sweden, and I'm a quarter Swedish, so my shout out goes to Sweden. Tell us about moving from Sweden to Michigan.
Well, it was pretty interesting because I had just gotten involved in acting and kind of a little bit of a jump start. I was on a nationally syndicated TV show, and I was bitten by the bug, and I really wanted more. I took some acting classes, and I was going to move here and take over the world. That was the game plan. And then I was trying to figure out where I should go and how I should make this all work. And I originally had my aims at New York or LA. And I didn't really know anybody there that was going to be able to kind of help me sustain myself and kind of become my new room. So there was an independent filmmaker in Plymouth, Michigan, who said, hey, I have some roles for you. At the time, I'd just gotten a couple of cool calls from Toronto about coming out for some commercials. So Michigan was kind of between Chicago and Toronto and this film. So I landed here. It's a funny story, but yeah, out of nowhere.
That is so impressive. Wow. So Michigan, how's the weather there right now?
Right now it's soggy. It's the 1 week of spring we get. So it's going to be raining nonstop for a week until everything is mush. And then it turns into summer. And then it's summer for 4.5 months. And then we have 1 week of fall. And then it turns into winter. So that's kind of how it works here.
Well, you're used to it now. This Michigan's home, and you have your cute children that you are homeschooling. How's that going for you?
Yeah. You know what? It's a lot of fun. I'm thankful that my wife is also home so we can share the burden, because that's 5 and 7. They are a handful.
What's harder, directing or homeschooling?
You're right. Well, you know what, though? I think sometimes managing, directing, and parenting, teaching are all the same thing at the end of the day.
Right. It's like switching hats, but not so much.
Yeah.
It's still balancing,
Yeah.
juggling, delegating.
Yes, indeed. And patience.
So you had bitten by the acting bug. You were on a syndicated show in Sweden, correct? What was the show?
Yeah. It was called Solstolarna. It was a cabaret show. We had in a lot of famous singers, especially. We even had Samantha Fox in. But we did all kinds of shows back then with all these hit actors or hit musical now. And at the time, I was a break dancer. So my primary purpose for being on the show was to do breakdancing as they were resetting sets and to make essentially a music video of the performance of the day. But then they kept us around and said, hey, we need somebody to go up and buy tanning lotion at the store at the beach. And I'm like, all right, and then I started hanging out with the actors, and I learned that there was a lot more to acting than I thought. But it was a lot of fun. It was perfect to get started.
So the most important question, can you still breakdance?
You know what? You're going to get an exclusive here. I made a film called Bennett's Song, and it was really well received, and I think we're in the middle right now of getting it on Canadian Prime TV, like channels. It's been so good, and we shot a sequel that I'm actually going to be downloading either tonight or tomorrow from my editor. That's finally final, and in that film, I breakdance.
Oh my gosh! Wow! So you kept
Full
that up.
circle.
That is so exciting. That's. I wish we had a clip of that now. You didn't send me that clip.
I didn't get it yet. I through editing, but yeah, I haven't even seen the final cut yet, because we had to get the credits and everything else added to it before it was final. And another exclusive, we just qualified and became a screening finalist with that film at the Vero Beach Wine and Film Festival, which is one of my favorites. So that's going to be a blast.
Oh my, this is exciting. Okay, so breakdancing, acting, how does that go into writing and directing?
Oh man, I just think that I love a challenge, and I think I love arts in general. I mean, I've been a martial artist since I was 7. So anything, a form of expression to me is a challenge, and it's fun. And I love things that you can't master, and all those things you can always get better. You always have a student mindset if you want to succeed, and always grow, always learn, always classes and those type of things. So I think it fits me perfectly. And writing for me is the biggest stress relief. I love locking myself up and write. I get in a tunnel mode, and I get completely submerged into the story, and I lose myself there, and I love that.
So when you're writing, are you like, ooh, I see this person for this character, this person? Are you just writing with not having any actor or actress in mind?
I usually, when I first started, I wrote and I had people in mind, but I had to throw away an awful lot of scripts because I was trying too hard to make their story rather than to tell the.
Right.
So now. It's easier to just let the story come out and adjust it in rewrites when you start thinking of who would play what.
Right.
because that way you don't get in the story. And I also think when you write, if you can place out your storyline and give yourself 4, 5, 7 points in the story that you have to tell, write those scenes out and then fill around them so that you have that domino effect when the story, that's the best thing for you, at least the best thing for me.
So martial arts, you have a really good career. I like how you just brushed over that. You're amazing, and you've won. Tell us about some of the awards and how big of a deal you are in the martial arts world.
So the last, I was on the Swedish national team for a while with judo, and I repped Sweden taekwondo also outside of its borders. But I had a grappling martial arts, striking martial arts. When mixed martial arts and no holds bar and Bushido came around, I was one of the first people that felt like I had a advantage because I was already a mixed martial artist and most others weren't. So I thought that I could probably dictate where the fight takes place and do well, and it worked out really good for me. So I had my retirement fight was in 2010. That was my last MMA fight. And then I've had some judo tournaments here and there, mostly at this point. But 3 years ago, I retired completely from coaching. But I still do a show on UFC Fight Pass called Warrior Wednesdays. It's WXC. I host and do live fight commentary for some of the best mixed martial arts in the world. It's very, very cool. And I'm happy to have that because now that I can't compete for myself anymore, it's nice for it still and to be able to share, my expertise with the world.
What were some of the titles you won?
Oh, the biggest one is called, it's like the European Open. It's called Fredrikstad. And it's a Danish tournament that pretty much has all of Eastern Europe participating. And that was the biggest win. I went that day 13 matches in one day and won every single one. It was a wild day.
Wow. And so then we go through all this to now directing. We had to spend 10 minutes talking about all your careers. So directing, it came after the writer, simultaneously pretty much, right?
Yeah.
And what was the first thing you directed?
So the first thing I directed was a film. Me and a friend of mine, we were sitting on a film set. We had just both been on Batman vs. Superman, and Michigan film incentives were doing great. We were happy. And then we hear that this new governor is going to cut them. So we're sitting on a film set saying, this is going to be over here soon. What are we going to do? And he said, you look like you have the same kind of determination as I do. We should get into this. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. My wife was in the film industry a long, long time ago. Her sister is a multi-Emmy winning filmmaker in Hollywood.
Is there some names? Who are these people?
Oh, her name is Kelly Parker. She's quite awesome. She even had a film at the last Berlinale, and she's pretty special. She does a lot of passion type of projects that go a little deeper, Skid Row type of, a lot of meat, a lot of art, and a lot of brutal beauty, so to speak.
I love that stuff. I love when people can bring that.
Yeah, she's fantastic, and she's such an incredible asset too. I mean, when I come out, when we have premieres, she's always, nice. She always comes and she always gives her 5 cents about the film progress, and it's so amazing to have someone like that in your corner. So she's awesome. But what ended up happening was we decided that we were going to do this. So we short filmed for a film challenge festival in Michigan. That the winner wins a trip to Sundance, and that was our first short film that we entered. We were in it to win it till the 11th hour, got bumped and didn't get to go. But it was a cool experience for us to start out with something and having, especially right out of the gates when we didn't know a whole lot of what we were doing. We had a $495 Canon 70D. It was crazy that we were even considered, because we were boomed by my friend Walbert's nephew, who we just taught on the fly how to do sound. So that was 4.5 years ago. Think about that. 4.5 years ago, we were doing independent films that nobody knew who we were, and now betrayed us in 20 countries, distributed by Sony.
How did you jump that high? How did you go from that to that?
I think first things first is I remember when we watched those first few films that we did, almost all of my friends were saying, "Wow, Harley, high five, that's so great." And I kept saying, "This doesn't look like what's in theaters." So I was always striving to have a product that was good enough to belong. And I think that has, talented people want to work with talented people. So what happens is it's this magnet of people coming towards us, all coming with incredible assets of skill sets that they want to display. And we audition and audition until we find the best. We take casting and crewing up super serious. And I think that has helped us a lot to elevate as quickly as we have. We've had 3 films now in theaters. It's wild to think about how far we've come in such a short period of time.
And you've worked with some big names. You worked with Tom Sizemore, Reid. Tell us about working with those people.
You know what? So every time I bring somebody in that I haven't worked with before, it's almost always referrals. So I'll talk to somebody. Jan Birch is a really close, good friend from the people under the stairs, and he initiates a lot of contacts for me before I bring somebody in. But I usually look up filmmakers who have worked with them in the past, and I check in and say, "Hey, I heard some things, so I want to check on your experience." I've heard a little bit here and there of everyone, but I can for myself and say I had a blast working with both Tom and Tara and all the other ones. John Savage was amazing. That guy is so on screens, he gives you chills. Tom Sizemore is probably one of the best natural-born actors you can find. I know he's trained, but he has a skill that you can't buy. He's on camera, you can't stop watching him. It's just he owns that screen. Whatever you do, he owns it. And it's been a blast. The only one I've seen that's on that level is in that Bennett song Holiday that we just did. Corbin Burnson, amazing. Holy smokes, that guy can act. I know Psych and LA Law and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang are big credits, but I'll tell you, that guy is still amazing.
And this might come as a weird question, but do you ever, because these guys are so amazing, so talented, and they may have been acting longer than you've been directing, when they come on the scene, do you ever kind of like let them take over? Or you're just like, "No, I'm the director, I'm in charge, I'm still gonna have, this is my vision, I'm gonna carry it through"? Yeah, no,
I don't for fun. This is my living, so I don't hand anybody the keys to the house at all. But what I do is, before we even get to them being on set, is I discuss their character with them. I talk about the backstory. I try to give them as much as possible so that they can feel very comfortable in delivering the character as I see. But I'm also very open to hear some of their interpretations, especially with actors like that. They will bring things that you just didn't think about.
Right.
And you will see that happen, and you'll be like, "Wow, didn't think about that. Love that idea. Let's stick with it." So those are things that you will have. But I've also had people where they felt really passionate about the role, and they wanted to drive it into the sunset, and I was like, no.
Let's come back to what we're going to do.
Yes, we need story. There's a scene in Abstruse with Sizemore where he confronts this killer, but it's the first time they're face to face. And I told Tom, I'm like, because Tom was trying to win every exchange, and I'm like, Tom, for this scene to work, you gotta let him win. If he doesn't win, then you can't come back and overcome and win the big battle. So you have to lose this one. He goes, I know. And it was so heated and they were so good that he had to go at full force. And it was hard for him to give that up. But when he did, it was spectacular.
I can't wait to see it. Okay, do we have release dates on, what are the release dates?
That one actually released November 1st. It is actually out. Abstruse is out.
Abstruse is out. So
yeah.
We could watch it. Can we watch it now on any streaming or no?
Yeah. So right now I have 7 films out. Moving Parts was the first one. That's pretty much anybody who's into a whodunit that want to try to be to figure out, be the detective while you watch.
Oh,
if
those
you
are
like
fun.
the Usual Suspect type of things, you will love it because it's the kind of movie that you have to go back and watch again and see where did I miss it. That's Moving Parts. Then I have which is my first step at a supernatural, a lot of fun. It's more of a fun ride with that one. And then was Bennett's Song, which is our first romantic comedy. Some of my favorite things about that film was we won film, best romance, best family film, and best comedy. So you couldn't even peg it into a hole. That's one of my favorite things when you can't what type of film it is. So that was that. Then came Betrayed, which was trafficking. Almost broke because I interviewed real trafficking victims. I interviewed people in law enforcement so that I would understand what the truth looked like. A lot of people portray things that are not actually real in how it works. And,
how was
and
that experience?
It was hard. And what really bugged me with that is I didn't even really know that it was as big of a problem here in our country as it is.
Isn't that the shocker?
And I feel guilty for being oblivious. Yes. There was a church. They had a church service, and they were telling us, all these statistics about women. And at the time, Michigan was 3rd in the country on human trafficking. And I'm like, how do I not know this? And how have I done nothing about it?
And I think a lot of people are in your boat too. A lot of people are in the same boat. A lot of people really don't know. Yeah. Unless you're educating yourself on it, you really don't know.
With a film that we're going to be shooting this year in regards to domestic violence. And this is a true story, and it was heart-wrenching to even just tackle and writing the script. The script is written by Jeff Calhoun and co-written by Nicole and myself so that we would make sure that it was a true story, and that this thing is going to be very, very hard to shoot, but it's so important to tell the story because when you're looking at domestic violence and domestic abuse, it is so common that most of the time the cops don't do much about it because people get called to domestic disputes all the time and you're lulled into a dispute. But when you start seeing the statistics about how many women die at the hands of their lover or ex-lover, it's not fun anymore. And then you start taking a step back further and you look at the children and what happens to them. It's heart-wrenching and absolutely crazy how this has happened. And I love doing these projects that have passion, but it's hard because you're staring the devil in the eye every day set. And you got to keep faith in bigger and better things somehow through this. And especially myself, I come from a domestic abuse home as a kid. So for me to go through this, it's going to be pretty special, but hard.
It's like rebuilding trauma, dredging it all up.
Yeah.
But it's great that you could impact people. I mean, it's funny you get in this business because you want to be creative, you want to be an entertainer, and now it's taking on a whole new meaning.
Yeah, I think, you know, I don't lose sight of the entertainment factor, though. I don't want to, you know, thump a Bible on somebody. I'm not interested in pursuing people as if I'm right. But I would like to show people at least this exists and we can do something about it. And get some reality out of them. I remember with Betrayed, it was the same thing. I wanted to place it in everyone's backyard and make them realize this is happening all the time in your backyard. Go do something. Activate yourself. Go support a shelter. Just do something. Even if it's just teach your kids better. Maybe if we invested a little bit more time and effort into our children, they would grow up with better, stronger boundaries and be able to not there, because it just shouldn't happen. When you look at most people you know, you don't see that monster. So where is it? It's got to be somewhere, because who is buying all these trafficked women and children, and who is beating all these domestic abuse victims? They're out there and they're hiding. And I think we got to find them, and we got to either help them if they can be helped, or lock them up if we need to lock them up.
Very well said. So what are some of these films that are already out there that we can see, and when can we expect the next one coming out? There's a release date.
So I have the ones that are already out. So Abstruse is the one with Tom Sizemore.
So where can I see that? Where is that streaming?
All of them are on Vudu, on Amazon, and most of them are on whatever your cable providers VOD. So they're kind of everywhere, but they're not on like Netflix or Hulu. They're on Amazon or Vudu or yeah. But Eternal Code was a big hit of ours. I think that one has been the biggest hit yet. I think Agramon's Gate, the horror movie that we just released in February, is gonna want to give him a run for its money. Now we have that sequel coming. I don't have a release date. I'm actually sending it out to the distributors that are interested as soon as I get it, and hopefully I would love Christmas in July release dates called A Bennett Song, and I would love a summer release, especially because it's a fantastic feel-good movie with a lot of diversity. We have 7 deaf actors in the film. So parts of the film is sign language.
I love that. We need to have more films like that. That's great. One of my friends is hearing impaired, so that's amazing.
Love it. Yeah, no, it's we've had a huge because in the first Bennett song we had 2 deaf actors, and we had the deaf community really surround us. We had a special premiere for just them of the film, and we kind of grow close with them now. And this sequel has a much bigger role, and we brought in a Broadway actor who is also deaf to play one of the main characters. It's an incredibly feel-good film. It's a film with a lot of positive emotion, a lot of typical American problems that we sometimes see.
Right.
And kind of fun at the and then we have a terrifying film that we're hoping we'll have in theaters by Halloween, and it's called Ash and Bone. And if you had Texas Chainsaw Massacre and House of Wax have a baby, it would probably be right around there. It's a very wild, violent film, very different from anything I've done. And that one we're hoping, again, theaters for Halloween.
How exciting.
And then the last thing is the TV show we're doing right now for Amazon Prime. It's called Tale of Tales. It's a really cool story. I actually play the lead. I hardly ever do in anything of mine. But I was offered the role before I got pulled in to direct and produce and write, for that matter.
That sounds like a challenge. I can't believe you did all that.
It is a lot. But I have a big team on this one of people beyond myself, so that helps a lot. But yeah, I accepted the role before I accepted anything else because it's such a good role. And it's more in that style of, you know, Breaking Bad and Ozark, of doing bad things to get ahead, learning, living in the gray, and you try to see this guy that you really shouldn't like, but you kind of do. So it's a fun ride. To play the character is a blast because he's I've never played anyone quite him, but Nick is about as selfish as they come. He'll walk over anyone he wants, but he's good to the people that help him get what he wants, you know? So he's a wild character to play, but it's a great story, and I can't wait for that one to come out. We're hoping for the same thing with that one, is to have a November probably release of that.
Thank you so much, Harley Wallen. You are so amazing. It was so great talking to you. We're going to see one of your trailers, and then we're going to interview William Brower. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sparkle. Appreciate it.
Breeze. And let's slow the heartbeat and the breathing down.
Downloading the brain and then planting that in another host brain.
They're selling this technology to the highest bidder, and I will not be moved. I vote no.
These are some of the most powerful people in the world. She's about to spoil their attempt at life everlasting.
The richest of the rich have your fountain of youth.
This could give them a new body, a new life.
If you don't change your position, I can't protect you.
We're breaking so many laws right now, Oliver.
Get it done. Understood? There's $5 million in it for you and your boys.
My parents are men came to my house. Please don't do this.
What happened here? Family's missing.
The whole family is missing.
I'm gonna help. I need to know what you know.
I will let them go as soon as we complete the merger. In her absence, the board has the authority to cast her vote.
The purpose of this technology was never so that we could play God.
This thing is way bigger than either you or I.
Don't worry about the odds too much.
Welcome to the Sparkle Show. With us, we have William. William, tell us your experience. You've written 35 books, and you're the ambassador for the Titanic.
I am. I'm actually the. I was the first U.S. ambassador for the Titanic Heritage Trust, based over in Coventry, England, down in the Midlands, and. You know, I've written 35 books so far, and you know, with the whole quarantine and such, I do have 3 new projects currently in the works. It's just my way of curing the boredom, you know, while staying indoors for the most part.
I bet with you, you're never bored. I mean, take us a little bit through your journey. You go to college, Full Sail University. Mm-hmm. And you're like, I like history, I like writing. So where does it go from there that you're going to become an ambassador for the Titanic?
Well, in a lot of ways, I ended up working a lot of things backwards in life. I graduated high school in '94. Initially was going to go into college doing marine archaeology and deep sea research.
Wow.
Ran out of funds ahead of time, and I'm the type of person that I don't believe in panicking or anything like that. I'm a very methodical and logistical person. So, when I found out that I wasn't going to be able to pursue my dreams academically, I actually sat down and checked out books on business management, branding, and marketing, and just started marketing myself with my research on Titanic, and doing lectures locally, and gradually expanding from there into doing consulting for teachers and things like that.
So where did the interest even come about the Titanic? Because this is before the movie that you were interested, it seems, right?
Oh, very, very much so. Yes, I always like to joke and say that my interest started BC, before Cameron. And
I love it.
Thank you. And basically what it was, when I was younger, I used to spend my summers with my grandparents, and so I was about 5 years old, and my grandfather went to take me to the movies, and we missed our first film. So as we were walking out, I saw a poster for the film Raise the Titanic. And, it's a Cold War spy thriller, but, it opens with the archive photos of the ship herself. And so, I'm sitting in the front row and looking up at the movie screen. And, by the time I had finished the film, I was already captivated and was almost immediately running almost 1 million miles a second with, was that a real ship? Was that a real person? Did that really happen? And, instead of blowing it off or anything like that, my grandfather actually walked me some of the stuff that he was familiar with about it. And, over the years, just had investing more time in, each additional song, always using it as a educational tool. So, I learned about things such as etiquette and navigation, how to plot a course, even getting over a fear of heights from jumping from the high dive and things along those lines. And so, it's through that part that that actually started interest altogether. And then, before he passed, he asked if I would continue the research, and so. That's been ongoing ever since, and
wow.
It's opened up a lot of doors for me along the way. I will admit that much. I was friends with some of the last survivors. I'm still friends with a number of the descendants of some of the passengers and crew.
Are all the survivors passed at this point? They're all passed away because
yes,
they've 105 if they were a baby. Okay, wow. How was that, being friends with? Did they remember did they even remember the Titanic? Because I bet they were kids, the ones you were friends with.
Most of them did, surprisingly enough.
Wow.
And of the 6 that I had, 5 were willing to share their story. The 6th one, even at the time, was still too haunted and traumatized by it. And so,
wow.
It was, long enough just to say, pleasure to meet you, and I'm sorry for your loss. And, we just kind of left it at that.
So how accurate is the movie to the actual story?
It's fairly accurate. I mean, I'll give an A for the visual aesthetics, and, also, some of the set designs. Other than that, obviously the love story could never have happened.
What about, so some of the things I'm really fascinated with was the class system and the sexes. So I know there was a class system, and there was also a couple of men that pretended to be women to get on the boat. Was that part true?
No, that's actually a legend that came up over the years as well.
Okay, so we don't know.
Yeah.
It could have.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories and conspiracies that have popped up. We have the men dressing as women. we have everything also from the coal bunker fire that caused damage to the ship itself. All the way down to even some of the more obscure ones as well too. Probably one of the most interesting ones that has been that circulated roughly about 2007. Just to tie in with the anniversary of the Roswell crash was Titanic sank because of aliens. So so you have your gander of pretty much almost anything and everything when it comes to that part.
So the class system, was that a big deal? And were there some survivors from the lowest class system? How much was that exaggerated? How much is that true from what you know?
That part is true. I mean, it was, the class system has always been around practically since the dawn of transportation. And it's no different than what we see here if we go to the airlines.
Right.
It's just a matter of how much money can you afford, and obviously,
I'm always in the lowest class at the airlines.
There you go. So I mean, if you got a coach ticket, they're not going to say, "Oh, sure, come on up to first class and have a complimentary drink while we're waiting." But yes, there were a number of survivors of all three classes.
Nice.
And so. Now of course, one of the other things that especially within recent years has been brought up at times was when the issue with the Italian ship, the Costa Concordia, had wrecked itself on the coral reef back in 2012. There were actually a lot of people that were trying to compare that to the modern Titanic, because it was the 100th anniversary and things along those lines. But
wow.
When it comes to that part, if you look at the statistics of it, the Concordia practically abandoned the ship almost within the first 15 minutes, while Titanic's crew, except for the ones that were ordered into the lifeboats, actually stayed at their posts. So that's one of the reasons why you have such a high statistic on death toll there.
Was it true, the captain, about saying going full speed ahead, that was his initial reaction? Not quite. What it was is, it wasn't his full initial reaction, but more almost similar to what they would have done with ships at the time. The general thought was that you would want to try to get your vessel out of a danger zone, as quickly and efficiently as possible. Mm-hmm. And so, a lot of times, no one really anticipated the idea of, striking an iceberg or striking a ship or I get it.
running aground. So,
do you see a lot of, because the captain was very empathetic in the movie, he wanted to go down with the ship. Was that very much to the research you've done on the captain?
Yes, very much so. I mean, one of the things that was never really touched upon in the film, because it was kind of more of like a side note in a lot of ways, was that Captain Smith was actually the highest paid captain for the entire Atlantic Fleet.
Wow.
So, at the time, he was averaging, almost the equivalent of a few $1,000s. So,
wow.
And then on top of that, one of the other things that did, that does, come to light as well too, is the fact that captains at the time, regardless of what shipping line they were on and such, a lot of the lines did offer an additional bonus, if you brought your vessel in without any accidents. And so, his record was, fairly decent, especially for the vessels at the time, and before Titanic, he was involved in one of their main, accident, which was on the sister ship, the Olympic. But what had happened was, when the Olympic was at sea, the suction from the propellers actually brought a naval battleship into a collision into the side of it, and so. Again, it was one of those things where, strong suction and modern technology versus almost a vintage style of training. It was just kind of like one of those little minor bumpers, but nothing too serious, though. But enough to cause a few ripple effects farther down.
Wow, that's incredible. What about the class that did, was it the project where they said they found a way that everybody could have survived the Titanic? That they did a project on that. Did you hear? I'm sure you heard about that a few years ago.
I have, and it's one of those things. Definitely, it's awesome to see the class kind of come together and put together a project of that nature. The only drawback is that it's kind of a modern context. Where we could look back on it with a 21st century perspective.
Well,
and
hindsight.
Always gonna be, yeah,
But were they accurate? Yeah, what they came up with, was it accurate?
It was to a degree, yes. So one of the bigger issues when it comes to the ship, in terms of like the lifeboats, is for the lack of a better word, it was more an issue of the British Board of Trade, and at the time, the Board of Trade did not anticipate the Industrial Revolution. So, they never actually measured anything by how many passenger capacity or anything like that. It was always done by the cubic foot and by square space. So, right off the bat, by the time both Olympic and Titanic were built, they anticipated a ship to be only 10,000 tons. So they regulated that the lifeboats were going to be a total of 16 boats for a 10,000 ton vehicle. Now, both Olympic and Titanic actually had 20 lifeboats. So, in the eyes of 1912 policy, they actually exceeded the safety regulations that was specified.
Wow, thank goodness. There would have been even more deaths.
Yeah, they were designed to carry almost 3,000 people. So, it was a very close call in a lot of ways.
What about some of the other characters that we know about? The Unsinkable, Molly Brown, Levi Strauss. What can you tell us of those stories?
Well, with Molly, right off the bat, she never would have been called Molly, and that actually only came about through Debbie Reynolds and the Unsinkable Molly Brown Broadway play from the '60s and also the film. Yeah, she always would have been known as Margaret. And
is her character like that? Is she
time.
this boisterous lady, or was she different than how she's been portrayed?
Oh no! She was very, very boisterous and very outspoken. In fact, one of the other little side notes about her that doesn't always make it into too many films. Believe it or not, she actually tried running for Congress before the suffragette movement even was established. She felt that women can do and speak their own minds without having the need of a permission from the husband and things along those lines. And so she was very, very forward thinking, compared to the rest of society. And
what was her life like after the Titanic?
After Titanic, she actually utilized her experience, to help, as a means of bringing in some speaking engagements and also for donations towards a whole bunch of different charities. She was always big on everything from education all the way down to, even labor statistics. She assisted a group of miners that had been on strike and had actually been attacked by their corporate bosses, and so she came to their aid. Only a few years shortly after Titanic, and so other than that, she also wrote a number of different articles and journals. Likewise, still staying within the same context. So she always made it a point to be very generous and philanthropical on so many levels.
That's amazing. What can you tell us about Levi Strauss?
Well, I think you mean Isidor Strauss.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. The original Strauss. Okay, that and then
Yes.
I got it.
No worries. Levi Strauss manufactured blue jeans, and are currently available online. But I think with Isidore, on the other hand, he just like a lot of many other of the passengers at the time, he was also very much so a affluential gentleman.
But
He
Levi
was,
Strauss is
the
a descendant
co-owner-
of. Isn't Levi Strauss the descendant of? Right, descendant of.
Yes, it's
Okay,
within the
just
same
making sure.
family.
I was like, wait, there is
I
a
mean-
connection. It's just that's okay. I get it. There's a connection.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
who was
it's-
Isidore to Levi?
Well, I mean, it's basically more just out of name alone, more than anything else. There isn't a full direct lineage on there that
Kind of like the
that I- that
Vanderbilts.
I've
It's a
been
very big
informed.
family where there's multiple. So we don't exactly know
Yeah.
how, but they would. Okay, got it. So tell us a little bit about Isidore.
Well, Isidore actually was the co-owner of Macy's, and he was very, very devoted to his wife Ida. In fact, they had been married for almost 42 years, and even though their birthdays were a year and almost 2 or 3 days apart, they always celebrated it on the same exact day together.
Aw, that's so sweet.
And so, understandably, although you don't see it, except for a 4-second cameo in the Cameron film, the Strausses actually were so devoted to each other that as the ship was going down, Mr. Strauss was offered a chance to get into one of the lifeboats because of the fact that he was a senior citizen, and
he chose to die
he
with his
actually
wife.
had said. Yep.
Oh my God!
Exactly.
That's the best part of the movie. So to know that was true really makes me happy.
Oh, it is, and admittedly, there are cases. A lot of people actually did write to Cameron and the production crew because their dialogue between each other is actually immortalized in almost every single Titanic book in print, and that's because of how many witnesses actually overheard it. Because for starters, Isidore refused to go into the boat. He said he was not going to go before the other man.
What a hero!
And then, his wife actually stepped into the boat at first, and then she came back out.
Oh my
and
gosh!
then she actually stood next to him and said, we've lived together for many years, and where you go, I go.
That's the real story. That's what they should have based the story on. I'm sure you have your opinions about Jack and Rose. Jack.
Yeah.
Do you want to share that?
I'll say this much. Great job on the acting.
Yeah, definitely. We like both the actors.
So, yeah.
I think we're all in agreement on that.
Yes. Yes, I can definitely agree on that one. I mean, Kate and Leo definitely know how to perform the craft, and I also will give them extra props too because this was one of those little secrets that didn't come out until years later. But among the survivors, one of the ones that I'm closest with was the youngest one named Melvina, and believe it or not, in her later years, Kate and Leo actually helped care for her well-being at the senior center and things along those lines.
That is sweet. So they helped an actual Titanic survivor?
Yeah, they did.
See, these are the stories. You're just so full of amazing information. These are the stories that we want to hear.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I have, this is a subject that's been with me for so long, and I'm always happy to share and willing to discuss it.
And then I had heard at one point, I don't know if this was a rumor, if this was truth, that there actually was a Jack Dawson that was in the Titanic, that was on the actual Titanic, but they didn't know that till after the movie.
Close. Yeah, you're close. The gentleman's name is actually Joseph Dawson.
Okay.
And if you go to Halifax, it's listed as J. Dawson. And
okay, so that's where the confusion came. They're like, there's a real Jack Dawson. I'm like, well, who didn't do their research on?
No, but it's equally funny though because as soon as the film released, the 70s actually was bombarded by almost thousands weekly of teenage girls leaving flowers thinking that it was Leonardo.
Oh my, that is so funny. It's funny, I was a teenage girl when this came out, so I remember that fan phrase, like the craze that went on.
Yeah,
how did you feel about that?
I thought it was fantastic. I really did, because in a lot of ways, a lot of my friends that grew up with me, we used to tease each other because they had to put up with it, hearing from me and my research on it for so many years, and that finally, by the time the film came out, a lot of them came up to me. It was like, you were right. This is actually a lot more interesting than I originally thought that it would be. No, I was like, well, yeah, I know. You only read 2 books. There's more, but yeah, it's very fascinating.
So you wrote about the Titanic. You have multiple books on the Titanic, correct? Or just...
Yes, I actually have 5 on
the Titanic,
on the ship itself. Mm-hmm.
So tell us about the other 30 books you have. I could talk to you for hours about the Titanic, but I want to know what else you do, because you're so super interesting.
Thank you. Well, let's see. Of the other ones, I have a fantasy series that I had worked on since high school, and that's all stemmed from my combination of my love for history, mythology, and literature. But it's not exactly the Robert Howard Conan the Barbarian type, but more of a young hero who is more prone to being a victim of PTSD, and has to learn not only to face his own demons, but also, how to learn to be diplomatic in a world that has been divided by a 10,000-year civil war. So
how many books are in this series?
I have 6 books in that series.
And you've been writing it since you were in high school?
Yep.
Amazing.
Yeah, a very funny backstory with it. It's almost like my own personal hero's journey. I originally started writing it in my freshman year, and I was in my science class, and I was actually getting bored with the lecture because the teacher was talking about plate tectonics, and I had read up on that particular subject over the course of the previous summer, because I was going to actually write a short story about earthquakes. And so, I didn't pay attention to the lecture and was just kind of zoning out. And there was a gentleman sitting to my catty corner diagonal from me who was sketching. And so I, had leaned over and, I whispered and asked him if he knew how to draw a minotaur. And, he just sat there and, handed me a sheet of paper 5 minutes later. And within the first 15 minutes of class, I already had an outline put together. And, by the time I finished that particular day, I had the first page. And then, from there, it just turned into its own little story. And, it picked up a fan base among my classmates. And my personal favorite, and I ended up having multiple visits to the school psychologist because of it. Because I was actually getting very, very in-depth on a lot of scenes. And so they were like, now listen, we need to ask you about this battle scene, because there's a lot of blood and there's a lot of violence here. Can you please tell me where you came up with this? And do we need to be concerned? And I was like, well, yeah, I can tell you exactly where I came up with it. I was reading a book called The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And like, oh no, that's her book. Where did you find upstairs in the school library? What? Well, yeah, if you don't want us to read, why are you stocking it upstairs? Yeah, okay then.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Yeah, so that's pretty much summarizes the the incentive behind even putting the story and the series together, and it allowed me the opportunity just to convey frustrations character itself. So it started off as being a project of friends that turned into a therapy project that turned into its own private comic book. So,
so can we purchase all of your books on Amazon?
Yep, they're all on Amazon. I have a few of them that are written under my alias, which is Philippe Aradox, and that's PhilippeAradox.
Oh my gosh, you already know the question that's going to come on. Why did you pick this unique alias?
Very, very simple. One of my all-time favorite characters in the history of comics is Batman, and among the rogues gallery are some of the villains that I like, such as the Joker and Two-Face, and of course the Riddler.
Go DC Comics.
Yes. Now, so basically, what I did was, with my first book that came out, it was actually my high school memoirs. And so by the time I started to pen that, a lot of my friends that were in that book had already gotten themselves established in their careers. And some of them had gone into the public side of things. So one was signed to the NFL, one was working at a news station, one was working at a 5-star resort. So I was like, okay, well, I can't do Animal House for real life without jeopardizing their careers. So let me put this under an alias. And, what I did was I kind of... Thank you.
I have never heard of a story like that. That's so funny.
Trust me, they'll give you a footnote to it in a moment, because it gets better. But yeah, for the alias part, I actually borrowed a concept that Bob Kane had done when he was writing up some of the characters. And so, in the case of the Riddler's real name is actually Edward Nygma, and that's Enigma. If you put his the initial of his first name to his last name, and so I was like, wow, that's so genius. And and then I was like, well, I'm writing about the stupid stuff that we did back in school, and I don't think anybody would believe it. So Philippe Aradox do the same thing, put his first name to the last name, and you have the word paradox.
I bet nobody ever figured that out, huh?
Nope. But the fun part there was actually on two levels. For starters, I had that book finished in time for my 10-year reunion, and so I was able to bring it in, and I was like, hey, do you remember when I said that I was going to actually become an author? Well, I did it. And,
good for you. That's impressive.
It was, but it was so funny because right off the bat, everyone was like, well, hey, congratulations, we knew that was going to happen. Where's Dragonsbane? Where's the fantasy series? I'm like, well, that's sitting in the filing cabinet with the rest of the high school stuff. Like, okay, well, when's that coming out? I'm like, well, I haven't touched it since graduation. Okay, so when are you going to go back and write it?
That's an incredible story. So you got inspired, I got to have a book published by my 10-year reunion. Then they inspired you to whip out the old stories and put that out there.
Exactly.
I love it.
So, so it's been an ongoing, circle of motivation, support, inspiration, and, everything else in between.
So the ambassador, how did you become an ambassador? Was there ambassador before? What does it mean that you're an ambassador of the Titanic for the U.S., right?
Yep. That came with a huge honor amongst itself. What had happened was the organization called the Titanic Heritage Trust. And it was originally run by a gentleman who'd passed away a few years ago, but his name was Howard Nelson. And I had heard of the trust over the years, just in the course of doing the research, and I had really liked a lot of their views and values, in terms of making sure that research would be available for the public, and that things were being handled with utmost respect towards the families of the victims and to those who were affected. And so I had reached out to him, and we had started a series of correspondences, and then it just developed into a friendship. And so within the short amount of time, he was like, "You've done a lot for preserving the memory of the ship, and you're not a descendant, and you don't have any ties to the ship." I'm like, that may be true, but that's it's because of the survivors who were friends with me, and so it's just me keeping a promise to them. And he was like, "Well, in that case, as the head of the trust, I would like to appoint you as the first ambassador to the trust." And I was just like, "Wow." Okay,
so it was just an honor you weren't expecting that just came out of the blue.
And I thanked him, and we left it at that. But within about a week and a half, I received official ambassador's papers in the mail from England, and
that's how it works.
I have them sitting up on my wall in my little frame with just for inspiration purposes. And I was able to utilize that just to help write additional articles for the magazine that was done through the trust, and also meet additional descendants who would have otherwise had been private. So it helped to open up a lot of doors, and also helped to solidify my research even further.
That's so amazing. This whole journey you took us through. I mean, it's really inspirational because basically it shows you could be a fan of something and make a career out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. I mean, one thing I always tell people is to follow your passion, because you never know where it's going to take you, and you never know what doors it will open for you. And
did you meet the cast of the Titanic?
I did not. However, I had the next best thing instead. I actually have a copy of the script signed, and then I interviewed one of the side members who was part of the cast, a gentleman by the name of Lewis Abernathy. And that within itself was a fun little sit down chit chat, and just to see that he was actually as gregarious and also as loud and funny as what you saw in film. That was actually him in real life. So
wow.
It just shows more on how the craft can sometimes blend the fine line between the character and the person. So
you were saying we follow our dreams, we follow in our passions, and it could lead to much success.
Very much so, yes. Unfortunately, what happens is a lot of people start to doubt themselves, and they also doubt, what to do, the steps they had made, sometimes even the actions of their past. And, as soon as you start doing that is when you're going to actually start putting up your own personal barriers. So, for myself, I always say that I would much rather put the attempt forward. And, even if I fail, I can at least say that I tried. And that's one of the main reasons why I have so many books out, is because I always said would try different genres. And, I may not be the strong, I may not be able to do young adult like Stephanie Meyer with Twilight, or, I may not be able to pull the romance of, Romeo and Juliet for Shakespeare, but there's a few little options in between that kind of sound similar, possibly, but it's always fun to say that at least the effort was put forward, and at the end of the day, it's time to try something new.
Well, thank you so much, William. I appreciate so much. This was so much fun today. I think everybody watching this is just, loves the Titanic, is going to love to go back, and this is such an incredible story. Thank you so much, William.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Other guys I that's what you deserve. I took all your gold, it's no lie.